In this video you'll learn, in a practical, simplified way, how the Flexbox works in CSS. I will not cover everything, only the most useful. With that in mind, let's jump to our HTML. Our HTML has a div container, a div with a class of the parent, and 3 divs with a class of son, and each single one with the first, second, and third. We also have here spans, but they don't matter. The only thing that needs to be in your mind is that this one is the container, because there are styles that can only be applied at the container in the Flexbox, and this one is the flex items, and this applies to every single one of them. And this way you understand a little bit better what are the container and the item, because there are styles that you can apply at the whole container. I will repeat, there are styles for the container and styles for the items. So, without forgetting that, let's visit our style. The style has the padding resetted, the body is sort of gray, and the parent has a high of 50 rem, and the background color of this 250 blah blah blah. It's like a yellow. And I'm going to show you the HTML. As I told you, the container is a little bit bigger than the actual boxes that we have here. This is the background of the body itself. It's not about the container. The container is only this yellow part. And this has some color, some borders, some space, some centering, but it doesn't really matter. These little things inside doesn't change anything at all, because you're going to start only now working with the display flex. So, come here, display flex, and remember, you cannot apply these on the items, but on the parent, on the container. So, this main div, which is the parent of the other items. Even though I change the parent, only the items will be affected. The span, right? The span, the numbers, will not really be affected by anything that I change in the container, okay? With that being said, we can already see that it got some default properties. And the default property that the items got is this one, the flex direction. And the one that's by default, it's the row. But you can also apply the column, which will make it in a column, like it was previously. But one really common way of doing things is that when you have the space, you have it like this. But when you inspect this, when you inspect your page, it starts shrinking, right? And if you don't want it to shrink, what you can really do is come here, create a media query, media, now you put hand, max width, let's work with the max width, up to 800 pixels. What's going to happen is that the parent will have the flex direction of column. So in this way, when it gets really small, instead of actually shrinking, it is going to, you see, you could put it a little bit smaller, something like 400 in this case, because it has space, but then it doesn't really have space, it becomes shrinking, and then it goes to the column. This is a really practical way of working with this flex direction. Another thing that's really like this one, it's the wrap, flex wrap. You can have the no wrap, which is the default one, or the wrap. And what the wrap will do is, when we inspect this, and it doesn't really have enough space, it will start putting it down. So, we don't have space enough, go down there. Well, we don't really have enough space for you as well too. You need to go down. Understand? This way you can avoid the use of the media queries if you want to use the wrap. Well, of course, there's also the reverse. So, reverse will simply put complete opposite. Not only the order itself, instead of being 1, 2, 3, it goes to 3, 2, 1, but it also goes to the invert position. So you might need to make some more calculations, more math, if you use more reverse items. As the wrap, you can also use the reverse on the wrap. And now you make something like reverse reverse. And this way it's already being pretty much hard, you understand? It becomes harder to work. The reverse is not really much used, and the wrap reverse it's even less used. So let's just stick to the basics and let's just recapitulate these two styles with just the shorthand, which is the flex flow. In the flex flow, it's like putting the direction and the wrap at the same space. So column, wrap. This is usually the one that apply the most, so let's check it out. it comes here, column, it's not column, it's row. And we have here the row wrap, we start as a row, but when we inspect, and if we don't have enough space, well, the items will simply go to the bottom when the space is not really enough. And then it starts shrinking anyways because it shrinks. Now let's bring our ruler to start measuring things up. We are going to bring here our justify content. This is where you align everything at the x-axis, right? The horizontal line, and I'm going to put center. In this way it's going to come to the middle. Pretty simple, right? But you can also put flex start, and it's going to be the default one. Flex end, which will make it to the end. You can also have the space between, and this way you will always try to have the maximum space between everything, and you'll always touch the walls here, the border of the screen, with your first and last item. You also have the space evenly, which will put space, exactly the same space between everything, between the border and the element, and between elements. And you also have the space around, which will give the same space between every item. You see, this space here has the same space here, and this looks bigger than this because this is 2 times this. So I will put in the edition some lines to specify where it starts and ends the space of each single one. Now you might also want to justify things vertically with a y-axis. So to put this vertically, well, I'm just going to leave the space around and I'm going to put align items. And align items is going to be where you can center vertically, okay? You can put also the center on the justify content, and this is going to be completely centered horizontally and vertically. That's what I used for this number centering. But let's keep with the space around, and then we are going to put it at a flex end as well, because you also have a flex end. It goes to touch the bottom. Flex start, it's going to be the default one, which is going to start at the top. You also have the baseline, which in this case it's pretty much the same thing. Let me try to put here some more text. Okay, there we go. Since the baseline now changed, everything around also had to change. Baseline is pretty good, but it's not really widely used, okay? Just keep in mind that you have this possibility. However, the most used ones are obviously the flex end, flex start, and most importantly, the center one. We also have the align content, which only works when we are wrapping things up. So I'm going to copy this Charles here, have a little bit more Charles. I'm going to remove this space around. I'm going to put it flex start, here flex end, we can put flex end. And what is going to happen is that when things are wrapping, it's going to the end. Flex start, it's going to the start. If we remove again, it gets again the default space and default everything. If you come here and put center, it is going to put in the center. So when you're aligning stuff, just keep in mind that justify content for x-axis and align items for the y-axis. This way you are going to be able to make things really nice already. But if you want to, of course, you also have the line content that's going to work with everything else. Let me just put the HTML smaller, and we also have the gap. And the gap is usually just to have a gap between the items. You see, here we have only 3, right? But we can also put 2rem to 2rem, which is the vertically and horizontally. Let me just get again the items, and in this way I'm going to put it align content. There we go. With align content at the flex start, everything is trying to go to the start, every row. And since we have here, let me just put another row of items. And there we go. As you can see, we have 2rem for 2rem, and if I only put one of them, it's also the same thing because this will apply to the 2 of them. However, if I put 1rem, you can already notice the difference between them. As you can see, the first one is going to always be the x horizontal, and the second is going to be the y vertical. You can also divide these in 2 different styles, properties. So just put gap column gap, okay? And you can put for 2rem and row gap for 5rem. And in this way you could check that the gap is actually used for the both. However, the gap is only used when there is not more space. Looks like a minimum space. it cannot get smaller, but it can bigger. As you can see, you have here more space, right? You see, this cannot become smaller. Well, with this you've already covered everything you need to know about a container. However, there's another world for the items. And the items, our flex items, have the class of sun or first. What we are going to apply here is going to be the first. So, first, style that we are going to apply, the property, is going to be the flex grow. And this will specify the priority. This receives an integer, so I'm going to put 5. And this is how much an item can grow more than the rest. The default value is something like 1. The default is 1. So if it has 5, it's going to be at least 5 times bigger than the rest of them. Of course, when there's not enough space, it will start shrinking, okay? There's not really much to do. However, if it has space, it will occupy that space. You also have the flex shrink that we are going to apply to the third one. Third one, flex shrink. And we are going to apply to 3. So, the flex shrink, it's the opposite of the grow. The grow specifies how much bigger can it be. The shrink is how much smaller can it be. Let's go. It's the priority that it has to become smaller. If you come here and inspect, when you put everything smaller, well, in this case it didn't work really well because we are using the wrap. We are going to put no wrap. And with no wrap we can see it better. The 1 is bigger, the 2 and the 3 is equals. However, when it becomes smaller, when the 1 starts saying, bro, I have no space, the 3, oh, sorry, I'm going to shrink a little bit, you know? And with this you can see that, of course, both of them have shrinked, but meanwhile they have shrunk a little bit, the 3 have shrunk almost everything. Property for the items is the flex basis, which is a little bit more complex. It specifies the starting value that the item will try to always have before any shrinkings or growings. As you can see here, I come here, right? And this is a little bit bigger because I put 200 pixels. If I put here 20, when the item has space, it's always having the 5 RAM or 20 RAM. But when it gets smaller, it's going to start, of course, shrinking. This is not quite the flex grow, but it's really close to the flex grow, because the flex grow, it's a number that will specify how many times bigger it will get to be around the others. However, this one is going to apply a certain measure, so it will always try to keep that measurement, okay? Then you also have the shorthand for the 3 of them. The flex, which will include the flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. So you can put something like 2, 20 RAM. And in this way, this is going to be the item that gets bigger, that's always try to grow bigger, but when it gets smaller, it is also going to be the first one to shrink. Because we put 2 to the priority to get bigger, 2 to the priority to get smaller, because an item can be the one that increases the most, but decreases the most as well. Okay, those 2 properties doesn't change one another. And then you also have the flex basis of 20 RAM. And this is really big. And it's not because of the 20 RAM, because the 20 RAM only applies itself when the grow nor the shrink are actually being used. Now I'm going to talk about the really last item property that I think that it's really good. The align self. The line self, it's pretty much the align items, however, only for one item, the line self. So if I put here center, the first one is going to get centered. And if we come here to the third, I can put the line self to the flex end. Okay, this is not really something that you will use a lot, that's for sure, because this is great and all, but only for certain specific components, and you might only use it for one single item, for a principal item or something like that, because in this case it's not really usual to align multiple items separately. With this I've covered pretty much everything, so let's just sum it up. If you come here, we'll have it default, putting display flex will turn your display to flex. The flex flow can put your row to column or the default one the row to, and also put wrap or no wrap, and this way it's going to stay as a row, but when not enough space it will start going down, and only then it will start shrinking. You also have the justify content, which by centering the justify content and the align items you can center everything up horizontally and vertically. You also have the gap, which is really fundamental to RAM, so it gets each individual space really nice, really professional. You have here for the first item, or for any item at all, you also have the flex, which has firstly the flex grow, the flex shrink, and the flex bases. And if you come here, when there's enough space, it's going to get big. When it starts diminishing, it's starting to be the first one to shrink. In this case it's not, because you have to have no wrap, so in this way it actually shrinks before the rest of them. And this is it, guys. I'm Diogo Veigas, and with this you've finally learned how the Flexbox works in CSS.